Hi, you all. Great to see you here. So many folks I've worked with across other projects as well. I'm happy to be here with Youngblood and Sarah to talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing with the Charm Project. I'm on the data team at Tracking California, so I work kind of at the intersection of some of our data and research work, and then a lot of the community engaged work. And this is why this has been one of my favorite projects to work on so far. I've been on the team for a little less than 2 years now, so this project started before I came on. But a huge shout out to kind of, you can go to the next slide, Isabella, um, to kind of the collaboration that's been going on between Sarah Ryan, Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians, and Tracking long before I came on. And Sarah might talk a little bit about that, but there's been work to address harmful algal blooms and other climate-driven events in Lake County. You're seeing this beautiful picture of Clear Lake. It's the state's largest natural freshwater lake. And Big Valley does some incredible work on all of the cyanotoxin monitoring there. And that's kind of where the partnership with Tracking started. So going to the next slide, we'll frame this project. Just to locate us, again, Big Valley is one of 7 tribes in Lake County, 6 of which have rancherias and 1 Khoi Nation that's landless. All tribes have been involved in the work in different ways over the past 2 years, and 5 of them have been on our working group. Um, and you'll see as we keep talking about it, Lake County is a rural county with several small interspersed rancherias. And so Sarah likes to say that this means people get in each other's business, as in something like a tabletop exercise or emergency planning for climate-driven events and extreme heat needs to include coordination between tribes and between non-tribal residents. There's a lot of overlap between the communities. And you can go to the next slide. So just to set the scene of, for those of you who haven't been to Lake County, again, it's a rural, geographically isolated part of Northern California. It's an area that's been really prone to wildfires. And over this past summer, right after this tabletop exercise that Youngblood is going to share about was hosted, we saw all of the events that we planned in this simulation roll out in real time and often at the same time. So extreme heat temperatures really rocketed in early July. PG&E started doing these public safety power shutoffs, which meant that a lot of folks during those heat waves didn't have power to keep their homes cool. There was an advisory alert for harmful algal blooms in Clear Lake, which are really dangerous for your health. And then there were also several wildfires, namely the Boyles fire and the Glenhaven fire, which Sarah actually had to evacuate for. So just really experiencing these things all at once and firsthand just really, underscored the reason why we're doing all of this work. And we'll go to the next slide. So this project is funded by the National Institutes of Health. It was a planning grant, 2023 through spring 2025. So we're wrapping up this phase. It's funded through the Community Engagement Alliance at NIH. And the goal was to bring together a really diverse group of working group of governments, so tribal and non-tribal government agencies, NGOs, and community advocates to just understand, like really bring together all the work that's being done around climate-driven events and how we can better support communities in Lake County to respond and be ready. And also just, again, improve the understanding of the health impacts of some of these climate-driven events, namely extreme heat and harmful algal blooms, and all with the goal of building a roadmap to improve the coordination and planning during these events. And for larger context also, as Youngblood's going to talk about next, none of us had done a tabletop exercise before. So that was a supplemental portion of the grant that we applied for and got later on that really ended up being this critical component to the whole project's impact, I think. The next slide really quickly. So as I mentioned, we convened a working group with Big Valley, and it represented 5 of the tribes in the county, many of the local agencies, including the Office of Climate Resilience, of Emergency Services, Lake County Social Services, et cetera. And then several nonprofits and community-based organizations, including Red Cross, that's really heavily involved in resilience center efforts in the local, in the county during extreme heat events or wildfires, opening up these hubs, as well as state agencies like CDPH. And we met quarterly with them, and they were also very involved in the outreach efforts we did. You can go next slide, and the tabletop exercise. And so then this is just a screen grab dump of some of the activities we did during this community outreach data collection effort. So over the summer into the fall months, we did a general public community survey, and then many interviews with the communities we were hoping to reach and hear from specifically. We knew we're more vulnerable to the impacts of these events, and Sarah will talk a lot more about that, but that looked like tabling at the farmers market, sharing flyers with all these different organizations we're working with, sharing on social media, and me getting to join Sarah's radio show at KPFC, which was really fun. So just a little one. And with that, just a very big overview of some of the parts of the project, I'm going to hand it off to Youngblood to talk more in detail about the tabletop exercise that was kind of the launching off point for all of the outreach we did, and almost a year ago now. So I hand it off to Youngblood.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to greet everybody before we get started. Manahu, hili hili hiat, ninian waso yepe, ninian MK Youngblood, Haslett Basin Hokomomono Tribal Community, Tuabi Atum. So a traditional greeting, said hello. My traditional name is Waso Yepe, which in English translates to angry man, which is ironic or not ironic. It takes a lot to get me there. My English name is MK Youngblood. I am part of the Haslett Basin Hokomomono tribal community. And in Mono, it's Tuabi Atum, which means children of the mountain. And I was really blessed to be asked to help deliver this tabletop exercise. It was extremely fun, and more so than that, or in conjunction with that, extremely beneficial. One of the things that you want to do with a tabletop exercise, obviously, is not to commit death by PowerPoint. That, I think, is one of the worst things you can do when you're giving a training. So we avoided that as best we could. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about it as we go through here. Go to the next slide. Myself, I'm Chief Officer of Emergency Management for CALTERRA, which is short for California Tribal Emergency Response and Relief Agency, founded out of Haslett Basin, out of our tribe. I've got over 30 years of public service, police officer, firefighter, worked for the Sheriff's Department. I was a tribal administrator, worked up in Lake County as a EPA director and emergency manager. Most recently, I want to share something that I'm extremely proud of. I am one of 2 inaugural co-chairs for the University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources Native American Council that we just started. It was just formed. So I'm really excited about that, to see what we can do in Indian country and how to benefit all that are involved. Next slide. So we had this exercise May 1st and 2nd of last year at Twin Pine Casino in Middletown, California. The timing, I feel, couldn't have been better. We were honing in on when we deliver it, and we wanted to deliver it before the summer hit, because we felt that afterwards might have missed the point of having the tabletop and getting everybody together and getting information out to everybody. Because some of the goals that are on here was to assess the community preparedness for a high heat event. And we definitely wanted to have the tabletop before a high heat event that year instead of after a high heat event. And then identify the organizational emergency response plans, kind of doing a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, enhance the coordination and communication between all entities. And this is huge, because I can tell you, as somebody who's responded to numerous emergencies, the worst thing you could do is hand out business cards afterwards. You should be making those connections beforehand, not after, because the effect is greatly diminished if you're meeting for the first time at the end of an event. We also wanted to develop a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities. And this is imperative because we're dealing with sovereign tribal nations. So roles and responsibilities will vary, obviously, through NGOs, local, state, and federal, as well as sovereign tribal nations. And then improve the overall community resilience to extreme weather. Next slide. So as we started out the scenario, and this is a quick synopsis, they were first given the information that there was going to be a prolonged heat wave in the area, something not uncommon to Lake County. You would think that it would be very nice weather there year round, but Lake County can get extremely hot, very hot, up into the 1 teens. And so we started off with that, with a prolonged heat wave. And we broke into groups and we made discussions, and we talked about what everybody's capacities were. And a lot of people, one of the big takeaways of this part as we move through it is a lot of people made assumptions. They felt that, oh, somebody else would help that, or they have the equipment to do that, or this is their area of expertise. And a lot of those assumptions weren't true. So next click, so it'll bring up. Involved in this is a multi-day power shutoff, a PSPS event, public safety power shutoff, which is extremely common in California, especially during heat waves or areas of adverse weather, because the local utilities want to make sure that fires aren't started inadvertently due to electrical equipment. And then with that, as we roll through, next click, we had a wildfire threat. We actually had a wildfire spark up, and we integrated that. There were numerous wildfires that had been in Lake County in the area. One of the biggest in the area, just outside Mendocino Fire Complex. I believe that was 1 million acres. So some of these fires can get extremely large, especially in the last decade. Extremely relevant to this area, which is part of the WUI, Wildland Urban Interface, level 2 and level 3. So some of the highest threats. And next click. And then this lake has a unique effect all its own that Sarah will be able to speak to. There's a harmful algal bloom that is accompanied with part of this lake. So we kind of threw everything together. And any possible effects that we felt that the area could experience, we included in this scenario. And Sarah can speak to it later, but turns out, I believe all of these came into effect later on in the year. Next scenario. We had a great showing. Very appreciative for Middletown Rancheria to provide the space. We had people from all different groups that were there. Made sure we broke them up, though, so that they didn't just gather together. You didn't get all public health people sitting at one table and only interacting with themselves, because that's key to this, was the communication piece. So we had multiple areas. And then throughout the scenario, we broke those groups up and rotated them throughout the seating area. I was blessed that one of our elders, Uncle Ron Alec, was there and gave a invocation. Next slide. Again, you can see CAL FIRE. We had public health. We had NGOs. We had Cal OES was there. We had a really good showing of different entities that would be involved in something like this in the area. Scarlett showed the small breakdown of the participants and the different areas. One of the NGOs that really stuck in my mind, I believe, was called North Coast. And he was able to inject some really good information about some things that they could do in the area that we weren't aware of. With that, next slide. And again, here's on day 2, at the end of the event. We had everybody gather for a photo. Extremely grateful to everybody that showed up. I think we're still missing several people that had to step out because of other duties during the event. But the biggest thing for me on the takeaway was the amount of communication that was done at this event. The business cards and contact information that was provided to everybody from this event, to me, is immeasurable. Next slide. Some of the feedback from it, they'd like to see more communication between organizations. And that was one of the things that we definitely wanted everybody here to do, was to at least get a point of contact and understand who the current point of contact is. I've had this happen many times where I have somebody's card and I go to call them and they're no longer with the organization. And I'm not aware of that. So now I've got to go through and see if I've got the correct person, how to get back to the correct person. So having that communication, one of the things that I want to challenge everybody here is contact your other entities that you deal with and make sure they have an updated contact list for everybody in your department, everybody in your organization that they would need to get in contact with. I feel that you're probably going to find out that they're going to update a lot of their information. And again, you want to do this before there's an event, not afterwards. Next slide. Yeah, it's not like somebody's going to be left behind. Everybody has to communicate. I'm not going to point fingers, but there are oftentimes when dealing with tribal communities, sometimes tribes feel like they're being left out. Sometimes they are. Some entities don't realize where tribes fit in the hierarchy of an incident or in emergency management. And that needs to be dealt with and corrected so that everybody gets the information they need at the appropriate time. Next slide. And yeah, breaking down silos. And I think this was something we did really good. Charm California and Tracking California in providing this, Sarah was a big part. We really made sure that those breakout tables weren't silos, because what we found was there were a lot of silos. A lot of people didn't realize with what other entities, even within their own local government, how many people they had, what equipment they had, what they could do and what they couldn't do. So, and this is really big, especially right now with what's going on in the political scene. Response and resilience not only starts local, it finishes local. Everything starts local, and then you ramp up. And then when you're starting to recover, it ramps back down. So it's always starting local and finishing local. Next slide. And some of the key takeaways, training and preparedness can't be a one and done. Since this, we provided, CALTERRA has provided several other trainings to Lake County tribes, tabletop exercises. And as such, we learn as well. And we've integrated some new training methods into that. Increasing the collaboration and coordination between emergency response teams and tribes, whether that's their community emergency response team or if it's their tribal law enforcement or tribal fire department, emergency management. I've always said this: if you're an EPA director or an EPA manager and you don't have an emergency manager, you're one and the same. It's two sides of the same coin. Nothing happens on the land that would not be considered an emergency. So that communication piece is critical, making sure that everybody understands their roles, rights, and responsibilities, and they know who to contact in real time. And that was one of the big things that we enjoyed with this tabletop exercise, is we made it happen in real time. When someone asked for supplies, and if they needed 40 firefighters or 5 strike teams, that doesn't happen immediately. You just don't say, oh, now you've got them. No, that could take several hours. And so for them understanding that even though logistically they need stuff and they're planning for it, it is not happening immediately. and you need to prepare for that. And then building the disaster resilient infrastructure and resources, again, having extra generators on hand or air filters. You might need personnel going around and checking on parts of your community that may be disadvantaged or have different needs that can't be met with the general public. Next slide. And then some of the outfits or the outputs. Definitely have to remember that we have to, not everybody knows the acronyms, and that was one of the things. And sometimes same acronyms can be different things. So PSPS, Power Safety Shutoff, EOC, Emergency Operations Center, Department of Public Health, your THIRA and COOP, Threat Hazards Identification Risk Assessment, Continuity of Operations Plan, Public Information Officer. There's a wide variety of different acronyms. We handed out a handout with definitions so that people could understand some of the jargon and the speak. We did have the contact sheet of the 43 attending peoples. There were parts of the tribes, county agencies, fire departments, nonprofits. Very pleased with the diversity that we had. Would love to have even more diversity and more people attend. And then we developed a documents and resource list, and this was handed out, shared with the entities at the tabletop exercise for what people could share. Obviously, confidential information wasn't shared, but if it's public information, we made sure that the emergency operations plans, the EOPs, any procedural documents, heat health documents, stuff like that, was shared with the participants. And then afterwards, we developed a after action report, or we call it hot wash. And we talked about the successes, the challenges, the areas of needs, and the next steps. And one of the things that's critical with an after action report is you don't assign blame. It's not so-and-so did something wrong and they caused this to happen. It's what happened, what went well, what didn't go well, and how do we correct what didn't go well without pointing fingers and assigning blame. Next slide. And then here, they're going to put up a poll. Are you interested in conducting a tabletop exercise, something like this? There's a wide variety of different tabletops we can do. And choose yes, no, or if you already have. And if you already have, hopefully you want more. And then share in your in the chat how you can see your organization doing this. And I want to thank everybody for allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Youngblood. David, can you share the poll results? Let's see what folks have said. Awesome. Looks like 81% of respondents said they're interested in doing something like this. So hopefully this is helpful, and we have more to learn from our presenters too. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So our next speaker is Sarah Ryan, the EPA Director at Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians. So I'll pass it to you, Sarah.
Thank you and good afternoon. As Isabella said, my name is Sarah Ryan. I've been working for and with the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians since 2001. I'm not native, and I feel very fortunate that the tribe has allowed me to be a part of their activities and their growth, and allowed me to be a part of preserving the natural resources that are so important to them and to everybody. Next slide, please. So jumping right into this project, which we felt was really important to do to make sure that the most vulnerable populations within the county, which included the tribes, that they weren't being left behind in these situations that creates a huge amount of suffering. And once we, once the project got started and Tracking California started digging into the numbers of the health impacts, it was surprising to find that The emergency room visits in Lake County were actually 2 times the state average during extreme heat events, and well, not just during extreme heat events, but just basically heat-related illness whenever it was getting too hot. And what was interesting for that is that in the hazard mitigation planning that all jurisdictions need to do in order to receive FEMA funding and emergency response funding during emergencies, the concept of extreme heat was rated as a low priority in Lake County because it was determined that it wasn't really impacting the community, and it could be handled by the resources that were already present. And so it was quite surprising to see that actually there's a number of people who get who are being impacted by extreme heat events. And obviously, if they're going to the emergency room, they these individuals are beyond the scope of what they can handle. So there's a need to get involved and to assist and develop programs that are proactive, if not or reactive, if not proactive. Next slide, please. And one of the things that we did early on in this project was develop who are the priority populations. The next 2 slides will describe them, but as we came together in our working group, you know, we knew that that because of the variety of housing from, you know, especially on tribal lands, homes that aren't hooked to utilities, as well as people who are living in homes where you know they're quite old and it's hard to heat or cool them off very easily because of the, you know, just the substandard conditions. There's a number of unhoused people in the county, also outdoor workers. So we knew that, you know, these were part of the vulnerable populations that we wanted to really check in with to see how they were doing in extreme heat and what their solutions were, what they were thinking about this. Next slide, please. We also looked at seniors. There's a number of seniors. Lake County is kind of known to be a retirement community, and there are, as it states in the first bullet box, 25.3% of the population in Lake County is over age 65, compared to 15.8% in California. So looking at seniors who often have heat-related, or they suffer from heat-related illness in extreme heat events. Of course, those with poor health within the county. And then amongst the tribes, and as was stated earlier, there are 7 federally recognized tribes in the county. We surround Clear Lake, which is the largest natural freshwater lake in California. It's an important spot, both culturally, for tribes in the whole region. So as well as for the tribes that are local, and so many people are coming out for dances and other cultural activities to throughout the year. So having tribes who are and the native population that's kind of coming and going because of festivals or dances and ceremonies. There's can be some overcrowded conditions, substandard housing at times, and in some locations, and you know, just it's another priority population because of being left out of the solution making in terms of the rest of the county. Next slide, please. And so with the rollout of this project, it was really about information collecting. We did look at out of all of the people within our working group who were responders, basically government or non-geo or NGOs, who would have some responsibilities in responding to the communities for various events, climate change, you know, climate change driven, or just various natural events. We did look at, you know, what are your emergency response plans? What are your plans for dealing with and responding to for and supporting the populations that we really are trying to get more information on here. And so, of course, so we collected that, but we also started doing surveys and interviews with these groups. A general survey that went out online and asked the whole community about the impacts of heat and harmful algal blooms. I do want to say that the harmful algal bloom aspect of it is there's multiple routes of exposure of the cyanotoxins and just the impact of cyanotoxins, and that includes just the smell, which can vary depending on which genera of cyanobacteria is out there. But there can be respiratory issues. 65% of the county gets their drinking water from Clear Lake and from public water systems mainly. And so there's that potential exposure through public water systems or private systems that are pulling water out. And then just the use of the lake and recreation and cultural activities and, visitors doing, recreating there. So there's multiple routes, and also with fish consumption. So asking the general population and the Lake County communities about how harmful algal blooms are impacting them, we opened it up, wide about that. It's like, what are the different ways that you've been impacted? But also, with heat, it was the same. People experience it in a lot of different ways depending on what kind of housing they have and access to other things. And then the priority groups, as is shown in the right hand table, we reached out to these different groups individually, both through our working group and the connections that they had, as well as targeting, and reaching out to them through tabling events and just connections that we had. So we were able to interview a number of people within these vulnerable groups, and you can see the counts there that allowed us to really get some insight from them about the impacts of harmful algal blooms and heat, their vulnerabilities, and again, even their ideas for how to mitigate for these impacts. And because the interviews were just let's ask a few questions and just let's talk. It was it allowed us to glean a lot of information from that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the respondents, there were a number of people who had a variety of these were in the variety of these situations, so that was useful. We did the limited transport's really important concept to think about in this situation, because one of the solutions that was given by in general by the county and by as a solution was, well, when it gets really hot, just head over to the library, which is open till 5 o'clock, on Monday through Saturday, and stays open late on Wednesdays to 8 p.m. So it's like get over to the library, or go to Walmart or go to a store where you can just hang out there for a while. But if you are a person who has no transportation or no money, or are disabled in some fashion and can't get out there, that situation of limited transport is really key to understanding how important it is to find some solutions that address people in those situations. So we were able to look at this from a broad based perspective of the different ways that the usual solutions are being barred for those folks because of just various conditions for them. And in general, most of the 95% of our respondents were identified with at least one priority group. So again, just really effective in and being able to get information from the groups that we had identified in the beginning of the project as really being key people to listen to. Next slide, please. So a few quotes from the interviews and from the surveys. It's tough. We don't have air conditioning at the house. I just have a spray bottle and fans and cold towels. That's coming from a disabled resident. Again, this is not somebody who can just jump in their car and sit in air conditioning for a couple of hours to really cool off. And they're also not necessarily traveling anywhere to get a break from it. So that ongoing being exposed to the heat and not being able to escape is very important to note. Also, a senior, no, I do not plan to ever turn on the air conditioning. I'm not going to. No, not ever. I can't afford it by myself. I'm already too close with my bills and what I get from Social Security. I will not turn my air conditioner back on. I'll suffer first. We definitely have heard things like that from a number of people. I'm sure you all have as well. Power bills are extremely expensive. You're on a limited income. You're going to decide what you have to pay for. And so you'll suffer if you need to. And so heat is very pervasive here in Lake County and other parts of the state and, and the world. And we are trying to find the solutions that will reduce this impact and the fact that that a lot of people do not have access uh, to the solutions. Next slide, please. We did, of course, because we're looking at this from a solutions-based angle. We, outreach and notification is extremely important to get the word out about, what's happening and also, where to get some relief from the heat. And there's because of all the fires we've had in Lake County, there's been a proliferation of the use of social media, in particular Facebook. And there's many, many groups. There's 65,000 people who live in the county, and there are Lake County Facebook groups that have 35,000 people on them. So, a huge swath of the county could be on just a few different groups. It's kind of amazing, but it really happened because of the fires and trying to help each other out and get the word out about things. So public alerts was surprising that it was something to come out on either on the phones or in some sort of press release or messaging was so not necessarily social media, but it could be happening on social media. And people really are as best as they can keeping an eye out on information from from a source like that. We do have a number of places where the Wi-Fi is terrible, and also you're not necessarily going to see some populations, such as potentially a senior population, checking their Facebook for, checking their phone for Facebook for alerts. So we realized, so it was great to see that there was other ways that people wanted to be notified. And what kind of information that they needed. There were, of course, people who said, please provide it in other than English. And so that's always important to get that information out appropriately. Next slide, please. So, because of the types of emergencies we've had in Lake County have included many evacuations and fires. The Valley Fire in 2015, there were thousands of homes that were burned and a number of people who died because of the fire and the inability to evacuate. People, especially the vulnerable population, are greatly impacted by these situations where everybody has to move. And it also is impactful because they're going to, the usual way of like evacuation centers like Red Cross and other evacuation centers don't always have they tend to be more strict. You can't bring your animals. There's no hanging out and relaxing, partying or whatever at evacuation locations. And so there's just this component of people don't necessarily have the ability to, they don't necessarily want to go to like an official evacuation zone. And even getting to these zones are or these locations are pretty difficult for some folks. Next slide, please. With HABs, there were a number of people who said that they had health health impacts of some sorts, whether it's themselves or the ability to or their animals. I can tell you from a tribal perspective of as again working for a tribal government here, that tribal ceremonial activities and cultural activities, they can't just go to a different place to do it. So the impact of a bloom happening in their area when they need to be out there for a ceremony is huge, because they are not going to find another location and wait it out until the bloom isn't there to do the ceremonial activity. So they are more likely to be exposed to cyanotoxins. The most dominant cyanotoxin in Clear Lake over the last 12 years that we've been or 11 years that we've been monitoring the lake on a very regular and intensive basis, is microcystin, which is a liver toxin. There have been a few dog deaths. There have been probable human illnesses associated with exposure to the blooms, and also subsistence consumption of fish is and regular consumption of fish from the lake is being impacted by toxin levels as well. The HABs can affect. I don't think that we've like fully categorized all the different ways that HABs are impacting the population. However, getting the feedback from the vulnerable population and the local community, we are seeing that definitely there's impacts in terms of changing how people are able to do something or actually being impacted physically. Next slide, please. So again, understanding the needs of the population is what we were really trying to access in the surveys and interviews that we did, because it's very easy to kind of come up with a solution and assume that most people will make it, and we really, because this is a partnership between Tracking California and Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians, we wanted to make sure that the vulnerable populations were front and center in terms of understanding what the impacts are, as well as identifying some solutions. And basically, we feel like this project has definitely opened up the ability to not only communicate about it, but that different groups that are working on this and on in general emergency response in the community are now starting to think about these populations in an even greater sense. We do think that this type of not only format, but this concept is definitely replicable throughout the state and should be considered, because the vulnerable populations need a strong advocacy. We are going after and have applied for some additional grants. We know that this isn't like the greatest time for grants. There's a lot of people applying, and funding possibly being less available. However, we're going to continue to work on these issues and address the things that we've learned. We did really appreciate the tabletop exercise because it gave us a chance to practice together in a multi-jurisdictional fashion the different concepts and who was handling what. And as Youngblood said, learning that, oh, we thought this was taken care of, but it actually wasn't. And, some things that came up about pets and things that we, hadn't really been aware of. So again, just the bringing all of us along, all of the population, all the communities along, to make sure we're all have access to the things that we need to stay healthy, and not be harmed by the extreme heat and harmful algal blooms is really the goal here. And I think we got a good part of the way. Next slide, please. So yeah, the prioritization of extreme heat, we did that because again, you can see on the left-hand side that the county had identified it as not the top hazard, which was wildfire, but down the list some, and not really as identified, and so therefore projects weren't developed to address it. now that we have gone through this process, the county has actually taken this up. They've added an extreme heat annex in their new HMP update. And so we're really glad to see that. They're going after funding and actually did their own tabletop exercise and invited us to participate to start to practice on these issues and find some solutions to the vulnerable populations and the general community as well, and what they needed. Next slide, please. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And then last but not least, we have Scarlett jumping back on to give kind of an overview about what's next. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, Isabella. Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah and Youngblood. So really briefly, kind of where are we going from here, considering probably everyone on this call is facing some level of uncertainty in funding and the work that we're all doing. But we're pushing along, and one of the big components that is the final component of this grant is this roadmap document. So some distillation of everything that we've learned in a format that can be actionable for all of the folks that we worked with. You can go to the next slide. So we wanted to elicit really like a structure feedback from our working group, and to make sure that it was in a format that would be really helpful for them. You know, we've generated so much information, and honestly, more than we have the time to build to dive into. I mean, these conversations we had with folks, 65 in-depth interviews with communities that are often left out from any of this kind of planning, just like yielded some really rich ideas and stories. People were really willing to share from with us. So the big parts that we wrapped together about the structure is that easy, searchable, bite size, accessible is going to be really helpful. We didn't want to just create another document that sits on a shelf and that is very long and important for, you know, grant reporting, but doesn't actually it isn't able to be used moving on. So most folks were saying that the data and the information that we generated and that we all brought together during the past 2 years would be really helpful in grant writing, with just helping to understand the needs of different communities in the county, and for, you know, informing their program. And then from this, we decided not to just create a PDF document, but to build it out as a website. You can go to the next slide. And so we're in the process now of building the CHARM roadmap to resilience for vulnerable communities in Lake County on a website form. And we're trying to organize it based on both, if you want to come in and search from the different kinds of climate-driven events, and also then from the communities and what they need and what their identified priorities were. And so we're making it navigable. You can switch between within each one of the bins in the learn more about section that you see. You have everything from extreme heat to extreme cold to HABs to wildfires, and then kind of data that we brought together and people's quotes from the interviews, and then, you know, figures and tables and things like that we learned from the surveys and the rest of the data collection. And then there'll also be, we've built over the past 2 years a really extensive inventory of any papers, plans, background information, research, databases, just resources, websites about climate-driven events, and not necessarily in Lake County, but related to Lake County, related in some way, to, you know, how to respond in an inventory. So things like that, as well as just related resources, hazard mitigation plans are hopefully all going to have homes on this website. And it'll also be in a PDF format, but that's just to make it really accessible. It can also be a website that folks who were participants can then go look at and find resources specifically geared toward their identities, to, for example, get weatherization, apply for weatherization grants for their housing, or get connected to different alert systems and things like that. And then to the next slide. What we'll be working on this spring is also just to hear, this is kind of a summary of lots of different avenues that we might use to share this roadmap out in Lake County and hopefully more broadly. And so there are several kind of consortiums of tribes in the county and beyond. So both the tribal governments that we worked with and the Hintel Environmental Research Consortium and the ML STEP, so the tribal environmental programs in all three of the Mendocino Lake Sonoma counties. Sarah is really involved with those consortiums, and so sharing through those networks. Also through county agencies, a lot of folks have mentioned that getting just kind of this in front of the Board of Supervisors will be really helpful to just understand the priorities of vulnerable communities that haven't been included in these decisions before. And then there's a lot of different other directions that it can go through our working group members, newsletters and sharing and just getting the word out. And we're hoping, we're still in the progress, multiple grants are in, and we'll just see kind of what shakes out in the next 6 months. But we're really committed and excited to where this can go, and have been thinking a lot about it. And we'll leave it at that, and really hope that some of it can be funded and we'll keep on moving. And regardless, I'm really, really proud and excited of the work that's happened so far. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much.